Hello book lovers, and welcome back or welcome to Nat Cat's Bookish Cafe. Today I'm here to do a relatively large book haul. Alright guys, it has been a few months since I've done my last haul, so it is definitely time to do another one. I think I have around 30 books here to go through. These are all the books that I have purchased or been gifted from November 1st through today, which is February 10th. Both my birthday and Christmas have come and gone since I last did a haul, so I have some gifts on top of the books that I purchased myself. A lot of the books that I purchased due to Barnes & Noble's sales that they were having towards the end of the year and around the holidays, but I also was gifted some gift cards, so I used those as well. I don't want this video to get too long, so I might give a short synopsis for each of these books, but otherwise, let's go ahead and jump right in. Up first, in November, I went down to California to visit some family as well as a friend, and the family as well as the friend each ended up gifting me a nonfiction book, which is nice because I don't like to buy them myself because they're so expensive. So the first two books are going to be those books in November that I was gifted. The first is from my friend, and that is 21 Miles of Scenic Beauty, and then there is Oxnard, and this is by Martin Alberto Gonzalez, and he is a local to Oxnard. My friend does live in Oxnard, and my cousins or family live in that area, though not directly in Oxnard. However, she went ahead and gifted me this book, and I am very interested to read it, and it is also very short. I love this cover with like the little strawberries. There's a lot of strawberries being grown in this area, but Martin flips the script through counter storytelling and testimonies in order to shed light on various injustices directly impacting his community, such as inequitable schooling practices, segregation, gentrification, and many more. So those are all topics I'm interested in, and it will be interesting to see how it impacts one area, especially an area that I am somewhat familiar with. As for my aunt and uncle, they gave me a chonker. It's huge, and this is about Frida, a biography of Frida Kahlo. I don't know how to pronounce her name, and she is a well-known artist. I have to admit, I'm not really big in the art scene or know much about artists or anything like that, so I don't foresee myself getting to this book anytime soon, but it is a stunning book, and she is definitely a woman who is well respected and well known, so it'll be interesting to learn a bit more about. Next, I got some books for my birthday. The first is one I've already read, and that is King and the Dragonfly by Kacen Callender. This is a book that I read via audiobook early in 2023. It was my first 5-star of the year, so I am super happy to go ahead and have this book on my shelf. I really enjoy Kacen Callender's work, and am looking forward to collecting his work. Up next, I was gifted Sinner by Sierra Simone. This is the second book in the Priest series. I don't know if it's called Priest, but I read Saint, and this is the next book that I need to get to since I'm not interested in reading the first book. I unfortunately wasn't able to get to this in January despite taking part in a readathon that was focusing on series. This is one of the few physical series continuations that I had on my shelf that I wasn't able to get to, but that is okay. I will get to it eventually. Sierra Simone is an author that I have really enjoyed so far, so I'm looking forward to continuing her work. And the last book that I got for my birthday is a nonfiction. Once again, I love getting nonfiction, so I don't have to pay for them myself. And this is The 100-Year War on Palestine, A History of Settler Colonialism and Resistance, 1917 to 2017 by Rashad Khalidi. Obviously, this is a book that is very pertinent to this time. The genocide in Palestine is unfortunately still occurring, and I have to admit I know very surface level information about the issue in this part of the world, so I am definitely looking to educate myself more on it. The next book is a book I just couldn't help but buy for myself while I was at Barnes & Noble buying books for other people for Christmas, and that is Bloom by Delilah S. Dawson. And this is a book that Riley from Riley Marie was talking very highly about. I believe it was one of her best books of the year. It is super short, and the cover is once again very stunning, and it is a kind of sapphic horror. I think some people push it slightly towards cozy horror just because of the way that the book starts off kind of with cozy vibes, but I am super intrigued to go ahead and give this a go. I've heard multiple people say good things about it since Riley has talked about it. Up next, I went to Barnes & Noble again because they were having their 30% off hardback sale. I got some hardbacks, but I also got a couple books that I just needed to pick up because they were either the next book in the series or I knew that I was reading them this next year, and that is exactly why I picked up Don Cato by Cervantes. This is a book that is on my challenge list. If you follow me, you know that each month, February through November, I am selecting a random book out of a little cup that has a challenging read on it, and I am attempting to go ahead and read those. And this is one of those books. It is just so long that I don't want to check it out from the library because I know that it'll take me probably 2 to 3 months to get through. So I went ahead and just purchased it myself so I could take my time with this story. I just realized that I have like not been telling you the synopsis of the books that I was talking about. Sorry, I just did an unhaul. The video I filmed right before this was an unhaul, and so I'm just used to like going through the books and not talking about them. But in this case, this is a well-known classic. And in this book, we seem to be following a man who's very enamored with the idea of knighthood, and so he sets off with a friend or servant of sorts and attempts to become a knight, I believe, and we just follow him on his adventures. So hopefully it's good and entertaining despite going on and on and on and on forever. Up next, I bought Monstrous by Garradaro Samano Cordova, and this is a book that I've seen a lot of people reading recently, whether it was for the Goodreads awards or because they were reading other people's favorite books of the year. And this seems to be a story that really dives into the concept of grief, and grief is definitely something I enjoy reading about. As far as I know, we are following I think I heard we're following multiple characters, but specifically we have a mother whose son has died, and she was told that if she took a piece of her son's lung and did some sort of ritual, then something would grow from it. And this little monster, Monstrilio, is, I suppose, the thing that grows from it. So I'm excited to check this out and see if I like it as much as everyone else. Up next, we have The Sunbear Trials by Aidan Thomas. Aidan Thomas is a author I have read before. I read The Cemetery Boys and really enjoyed it and have been wanting to check out this book for a while. And since it was on sale, I went ahead and picked it up, and also it's shiny. And as far as I know, this is, I don't know if it's Aztec inspired, but we have different characters who are taking part in some sort of competition. And I don't remember if the loser or the winner gets to be sacrificed to the sun god. I don't know, but I'm intrigued. It's queer and I've heard good things about it. The next two are actually both anthologies, which is maybe a little surprising since anthologies don't work so well for me. In fact, I think I have 3 anthologies in total in this book haul. But the first one is going to be Out There Screaming by Jordan Peele, and this is just a collection of short stories that are Black horror. And so far, I've heard relatively good things about this. I do really enjoy Black horror, and when it comes to short stories, I think horror is something that will work relatively well for me, so I'm very excited to go ahead and check this one out. Next, we have Being Ace, and this is edited by Madeline Dyer and has a bunch of different authors in here who are writing stories revolving around different ace characters. I believe it says an anthology of queer, trans, femme, and disabled stories of asexual love and connection. I am someone who's on the ace spectrum, so I'm always looking for ace representation in my books. Up next, I ended up getting Ander and Santi Were Here by Johnny Garza Villa, and I have always loved the cover of this book. It has always intrigued me. I believe we are following a boy who falls for another boy, and that boy seems not to be here legally in the States, and they are just trying to be together while also trying to deal with ice showing up, so I have a feeling that it's going to be a rather impactful and emotional read, and that is something I enjoy in my stories. The last book I picked up on that Barnes & Noble run, it was going to be volume 8 of Heaven's Official Blessing. Now I will have volume 7 later here in the haul. I ended up getting that later because volume 7 was on my gift list, so I didn't want to get it just in case someone else bought it, but volume 8 wasn't on there, so I went ahead and picked it up just so that I had it on hand when I got volume 7 and ended up reading it. And I have read and finished this series and had a wonderful time with it, and I'm just so happy to have these in my possession because they're so beautiful, and they also have works of art within them, but let me not do one that could be considered spoilery. So you can see they kind of have little works of art throughout them as well. As far as the synopsis for these, if you've been around, you know them because I've been talking about them all the time. Pretty much this is translated from Mandarin. It's, what are they called? Danmi? I don't think I'm saying the word right, but there's a specific type of word which means that it's a Chinese BL novel, and obviously these are affected by the Chinese government's oversight on topics like these, but they are in fact queer. And in this story specifically, we are following a god who has ascended to a godhood for the 3rd time. They have terrible luck, and we are just following them both in their past and their present. And in their present, they are slowly but surely falling in love with a ghost king known as Hao Chen. So that is a much shorter synopsis than I usually give, but usually the synopsis for this is kind of long, and we're not going to go into that, but you can check out some of my previous wrap-ups and whatnot. I'm sure I gave a synopsis for this. Now we're getting into the books that I got for Christmas. The first one is going to be The Traveling Cat Chronicles by Hiruro Arakawa. This is a book that I just know is going to make me cry. Every time I think about what this book could potentially be about, I'm like, I'm already tearing up and I haven't even read the first page. But in this book, I believe we are following a man who is visiting multiple friends with his cat, and we just kind of follow them as they're having, I'm assuming, different conversations, and I feel like I know what's going on, and if that's the case, you will find me crying in a puddle of my own tears, obviously. So next I got another non-fiction, and that is the transgender issue by Sean Fay, and this is just an issue that I'm invested in. Obviously there have been a lot of laws passed or attempted to be passed in this country over the last few years that are making it very difficult to be trans, and I personally, as I should, feel like it is perfectly fine to be trans, perfectly normal, and that you should not be oppressed or threatened in any manner. At the same time, I don't interact a lot with trans people. They're not within the circles that I move in, mostly because the circles I move in are super teeny tiny. Don't interact with a lot of people, period. But I would still like to go ahead and obviously know more about this topic. So very happy to have this. Next is that 3rd anthology I was talking about, and that is A Never Whistle at Night. And this is a anthology, I believe, once again, of horror, but this is indigenous horror revolving around the concept that you are not supposed to whistle at night, obviously. So I've heard really good things about this. Once again, we have a stunning cover, so I'm super excited to check this out. Next, I got Pet by Akwaeke Emezi. Akwaeke Emezi is the author of one of my all-time favorite books, which is The Death of Vivek Oji. I do still own Freshwater and have not read it yet, but I'm more than happy to have multiple works for them lined up on my shelf, and I believe this is more YA or middle grade even, since we are following a younger character, and I believe she kind of lives in a world where there's no monsters anymore, but then someone tells her that there is a monster and that it's potentially living with one of her friends. I don't know, this book is relatively short, so I'm more than happy to go into it blind. The next book is going to be A World Running Down by Al Hez. This is a kind of post-apocalyptic story. We are following a trans main character. I kind of found this book after I read Hell Followed Us by Andrew Joseph White, and just kind of the trans character in a post-apocalyptic world really intrigued me. We are following a main character who is kind of living out in the wastelands, and they are trans, they're a trans male, and their hope is to go into the city because when they're in the city, they would have access to the testosterone as well as the surgery they need to feel fully comfortable in their body. And one day an AI from the city comes to them and offers them the opportunity to get a visa in the city if they help them collect these runaway androids. And obviously he agrees to that, but as he starts this journey, he realizes that the androids don't want to return to their old lives, and who is he to make that decision for them and to make them suffer so that he can get what he wants. And so he's kind of struggling with that idea a little bit. I'm assuming there's also going to be a romance between him and this android, seeing as this android was described as handsome. So I am very intrigued. And the last book I got for Christmas is going to be Strange the Dreamer by Laini Taylor. I'm so happy to finally have this on my shelf. I've been meaning to read this book for a couple years now, and I just never pick it up, and I'm assuming now that it's actually on my shelves, I will do so. And this is a relatively well-beloved book. I believe we are following a character named Laszlo Strange, and he is very obsessed with a town called Weep, but it seems Weep has been erased off of the map, and one day people from Weep actually show up and ask him to come there to help with some sort of problem they're having. So it sounds like an interesting concept, and I hope that I actually like it after waiting years and years to actually get around to it. Next book we have is The Spirit Bears Its Teeth by Andrew Joseph White, which is that author I just mentioned that I really enjoyed their other book. Now, if you're not following Is Bailey reading, you should be. I will go ahead and link her down below, specifically where she announces the next 3 books in her book club, because she has asked me to help host the April round of that, and this is the book that I have selected. So if you want to go ahead and read that with us in April and then join us for the live show, we would love that. I am very interested to read this book. I think it would be very fun to discuss it. In this book, we are once again following a trans character, and this young man has no interest in being a wife. And because of this, they are sent to kind of a school, is probably not the right word, kind of like a sanatorium. Is that what they're called? But either way, they are sent there to become the perfect wife. And they actually, I believe, have the ability to see spirits, and they are realizing that some of the girls that have been there in the past are coming to them to let them know that they have been murdered there, and they have to kind of figure out what the heck is going on and how they can tear this place to the ground. And these are horror stories, and Andrew does not shy away from the body horror aspect of it, so just know that it is a YA though. Next we had another Barnes & Noble sale. I believe this was the one where hardbacks were 50% off, and the first one I ended up getting in, and that is The Midnight Girls by Alicia Jasinska. I hope I am pronouncing that correct. This is another book that I heard Riley Marie talking very highly about. I feel like I get a lot of book recommendations from her. I think she just, like, the way she talks about her books, I'm like, okay, fine, I'll read that book if you say so. But I think she said that this one had a really good enemies to lovers sapphic romance in it, and as far as I know, this is a standalone, and I'm always more than happy to read a fantasy standalone so I don't add to the amount of series that I'm working on. But I honestly have no idea what this book is about anymore. I want to say there's 2 women and they're fighting over the heart of a prince possibly, and then end up falling for each other. So there's some sort of magical contest. So sounds exciting. I do believe that this is YA, but I have high expectations for it. The other book that I got is another nonfiction, since it was 50% off. How could I say no? And that is The Greatest Displacement, Climate Change, and the Next American Migration by Jake Biddle. And I was kind of just browsing through their nonfiction options, and this cover kind of caught my attention. So I looked it up in Goodreads, and there is a guy that I follow on Instagram who reads primarily nonfiction, and he said that this was one of his favorites of 2023. So I said, you know what, let me snatch that up. Even though I've barely read any nonfiction, I'm still buying it. It says the untold story of the climate migration in the United States and what it means for all of us. I think we hear a lot about migration when it comes to people migrating to America as like refugees or asylees because of climate issues, but we don't really hear about actual migrations within America. So I think it would be very interesting to read about. And then after my birthday and Christmas passed, I went ahead and bought myself a volume 7 of Heaven's Official Blessing. And as I already mentioned, I finished the series, so this is read and enjoyed. Up next, I ended up buying myself a new copy of Howl's Moving Castle. Once again, I say Riley Marie influences my purchasing. She really does. She went ahead and let us know that she got this gorgeous cover. And I was like, where did you get that? And I believe it was Blackwell's because it's from the UK. So I went ahead and snatched it up because honestly, all the covers of Howl's Moving Castle are ugly in my opinion. So finally, a beautiful cover to reflect this beautiful story. If you don't know Howl's Moving Castle, watch the movie, read the book, do both. They're very different. But essentially we are following Sophie, and she is one of 3 sisters, and you can consider her maybe like the unlucky one, the responsible one, the plain one. And her family owns a hat shop, and she is assuming that while her sisters go off and do things, she is going to stay and take care of this hat shop. However, one day the Witch of the Waste shows up and puts a curse on her that turns her into an old woman. So she heads off into the waste to kind of, I don't know, live out the rest of her life or just enjoy life in the way she never thought she would now that she is old and her time here on Earth has been very limited. But there she runs into Howl's Moving Castle, and she pretends to be his cleaning wife, and she just kind of hangs out in this house being snarky and whatnot. And eventually she and Howl develop a relationship. I would say that I would not consider this book a romance by any stretch of the imagination. The romance is really something that very subtly blooms in the background, but overall it's just a very magical story. All right, up next we have, it's kind of a cover buy because I'm also really interested in the story, but someone that I follow on Instagram put this as their favorite book of the year, and I saw this cover and I was like, I have to buy this book. Like, I don't care if I read this book and it ends up being the worst book I've ever read in my life. I am keeping this book on my shelf because this cover is so stunning. Let's take a look. I don't even know if my phone camera can really give justice to how stunning this is. Obviously called Angels Before Man, and that is by Raphael Nicholas, and this is a queer retelling of the fall of Satan. So this is Satan and this is Michael, and pretty much I think Lucifer is kind of chilling in heaven. I don't think he's very happy with his life, and one day the strongest angel Michael shows up and they kind of form a friendship and eventually something more, and then it seems that God gets jealous. So I am very intrigued to kind of see where this story goes. I am not very familiar with the fall of Satan or anything because I don't read scripture, I've never been to church, things like that, but that doesn't mean that I am not going to read the heck out of this book. All right, and the last 3 books are all part of the same series, and that is the Monstrous series by Lily Mayne. I've slowly but steadily made my way through this book, or the series, and I have already read Moth. Absolutely loved it. 5 stars. And then I did go ahead and buy the last 2 books that are already out. Book 5, which is Seraph, and book 6, which is Lore. And Lore, like, look how much bigger it is compared to the other books. She is a chonker. But essentially these are monster romances, and we are following male-male partnerships, and it takes place in post-apocalyptic America. And pretty much there was a rift that occurred between our world and the world that these monsters are coming from, and 20 years ago when that rift really burst open and a bunch of them fled flooded in. The military had bombed them very heavily and ended up destroying a lot of their own land. And so we find ourselves in a world where the military is definitely in control. There's these large walled cities where you can live in, lots of poverty, disease going around them. There's also a lot of military bases as well as the wastes where the raiders live. And we are just following different characters throughout this world as they fall in love with different monsters. All of them are somewhat interconnected, maybe they're friends, things like that, and it is just a wonderful time. I am very sad that I am approaching the end of the series. Goodreads says that there is a book 7 coming out in December, so that is a whiles away, but we will be patient. Anything that Lily Mayne writes is worth the wait. All right, guys, I actually have 2 more books. I think I said these were the last ones, but these 2 I don't own physically, so I forgot about them. But the first one is going to be Straight by Chuck Tingle. I went ahead and bought the Kindle book of this. I already read it because it was on my February TBR. Unfortunately, did not love it. Didn't hate it, but you know, it is what it is. This was a short story. I think it's about 120 pages or so, and we are following a group of young queer people, probably like in their 20s, not teenagers or anything like that, but they head out to Joshua Tree, which is a desert area, because once a year there is a time known as I think it's called the saturation, and pretty much the earth passes through this dark place, like this blank space, like there's literally nothing there, and every time they pass through it, it takes 24 hours, and all the straight people kind of go feral, like they lose control, they get so angry, and they start killing all the queer people around them. So obviously the first time this happened, there was a mass casualty of queer people. There was also a ton of people that were like outed, you know, a lot of powerful people, maybe even people that were like far right, who were like, yeah, no, we hate queer people, and then they're like, well, you didn't go crazy, so like obviously you're queer. And this book takes place during the 3rd year where this is occurring, and it's a cool concept, but I definitely think it would have benefited from being a full-length novel. And the last book, I did actually buy a physical copy, but I just bought it a few days ago from Pango and it's not here yet, so I decided to just put it in here so I don't have to wait until my next haul to talk about that. And that is going to be House of Hollow by Crystal Sutherland. This was one of my best books of the year. I absolutely loved it, but I listened to the audiobook, so I didn't own it physically. This book I bought as part of a reward system / challenge that I'm setting for myself. I'm really bad at buying books that I've already read, no matter how much I love them, but at the end of the day, I really want my shelves to reflect, you know, all the books I loved, whether I got them from my library or whether I read them via KU, or even if I read them via Libby or an audiobook, I guess you should say. And so what I've decided to do is every time I read 10 physical books off of my physical TBR, I can go ahead and purchase 1 book that I have already read and really enjoyed. And so I did read 10 books off of my physical TBR here in January, and I went ahead and selected this as my first book. I think it's going to be a really good way for me to not feel guilty about buying these books, despite the fact that I may never actually physically read them, because I may read them like as an audiobook again if I reread them, but it just is the way it is. I'm happy to have it on my shelves. And this is a young adult horror story, and we are following 3 sisters who had at one point disappeared from right in front of their parents, and when they reappeared, it seemed that they may be a little bit different. The story takes place a few years after that happens, and one of the sisters, I believe, disappears again, and so they kind of set off to see if whatever had dragged them away the first time is back. And I just absolutely love the story, love the sisterly relationships. There was some queerness in here as well, and just overall enjoyed the ambiance, the vibe, and the kind of creepy fae nature horror that was going on. All right guys, we are done with this haul. We'll see when I do my next one, because I will say that this one had quite a few books, so maybe I'll do one a little bit sooner. However, I will say towards the beginning of the year I do go kind of hard with the book buying, just because I have spent November and December doing a book buying ban, and then I have like gift cards and whatnot that I can use, and then I usually kind of chill out a little bit until maybe like June, and then I'll be like, I haven't bought a lot of books in a long time, and then I go hard again. So that's just the way that it is. I'm a book binge buyer, and then I kind of chill out for a while. But I would love to know if you guys have seen any books here today that you have read or loved, or even any books that you are really interested in hearing my opinion on, which ones you would love me to prioritize. And as always, thank you so much for supporting my channel by watching my videos, and I hope to see you next time. Bye!